Nick Spencer and Patrick Gleason bring us into the finale of the grand saga Nick has been building all our stories towards, as Kindred's secrets are revealed and sins are confessed as Norman Osborn and MJ confront Harry and enact a daring plan to rescue the Spider family and to end Kindred once and for all. Spencer caps off his Last Remains story in a thoroughly satisfying way that reveals itself to be only the end of a part 1 of a larger story, exploiting the scale of Spencer's plot and widening the reach of Kindred, and even pulling in plots we haven't seen gone on nearly 50 issues. It was great that Mary Jane was at the center of this issue and was really the one who was the hero this issue and of this event really. The ties to One More Day begin to resurface here, and the event and its future chapters looks to be now focusing on retconning that away, which I am sure makes a lot of people extremely happy about. With a huge cliffhanger ending, I'm looking forward to seeing what Spencer has in store for us in his follow-up to this event and what is next for Kindred now that he's most likely captured by Norman and Wilson. Patrick Gleason returns to the book after a while off of it and delivers some truly awesome action and drama with his work. I loved his fight scenes this issue and how creative they were, with Peter shooting webs through Kindred's head and swinging him around the room with it while his legs were webbed down to the floor so he wouldn't pull himself up out of the floor or something. It was something so comic booky, and the paneling for it really was well done, making it look like Kindred smashed out of between two panels. His take on Green Goblin is also really great as well. He looks appropriately creepy, especially thanks to Edgar Delgado's lovely colours, which are quite bright throughout this issue, and it's a great counter to the rather dark storyline. The Amazing Spider-Man issue 55 finished up Nick Spencer's Last Remains story that ended with quite literally a bang, but also begun a larger storyline that looks to bring in a lot more plot lines from all of Spencer's 50 plus issues. I'm excited to learn what exactly Wilson Fisk and Norman's plans are for Kindred, as well as what happened to Peter and MJ. I'm going to give this issue a 10 out of 10. The Amazing Spider-Man issue 55 sees Kindred not understand Peter, knowing how he's always been a loner and not worked with anyone, but then suddenly he was surrounded by other people from the Spider family, all who share his name, something that was so unlike Peter up until then. But Kindred realizes that if poor orphan Peter couldn't have a family, at least Spider-Man could. Kindred has taken the Spider family and set them around his creepy dining table, as Peter tells Harry the family have nothing to do with this, but the villain disagrees since they have everything to do with this and are the symptom of a larger problem, Peter's selfishness. He tells Peter that anyone getting involved with him dies, and he brought them there so he can have dinner with the dead, but it all has to end now. Gwen tells Harry just to get it over with, wanting him to spare them the speech of how he's going to do it. She says that none of them asked Peter for permission to be in his family, but Kindred seems rather obsessed about it. Kindred says that Gwen doesn't remind him much of the Gwen he knew, knowing when Peter looks at her, he's really staring off past her and past all of them, only ever having eyes for MJ. Mary Jane meanwhile enters the mausoleum, prompting Peter to yell at her to get out of there, but Kindred invites the woman in, finding it warms his dead heart to be all together again. MJ is glad that Harry likes it, making the villain realize that she is aware of who he is, knowing it's probably for the best, telling MJ to have a seat for an old friend. Peter manages to rip himself out of the chair, telling Kindred to get away from MJ, punching a hole in the villain's head, shooting web out of the back of it so he can fling the villain around the chamber, destroying many of the walls. The villain grabs Peter as his face reforms, telling the maggot-covered hero that maybe making MJ watch Peter die over and over will finally make the hero give in. MJ tells him to stop, telling Kindred that they have to have dinner, but Kindred isn't interested in doing that now. MJ convinces Peter to join her, and they all sit at the table as Norman radios into his men, telling them MJ is in. Harry meanwhile gets nostalgic for the good old days of Peter becoming a great scientist while he was set to inherit his family's empire and MJ was going on to be famous. He remembers one night when he thought they were all going to get what they dreamed of, all except him, since it was the night that things started to go wrong for him. Harry says that Peter and the real Gwen split up and she went off to Europe, but as soon as Peter got back into town, MJ was done with Harry and went for Peter. MJ tries to say that's not true, but Harry knows that it was very obvious the two were meant to be together. Peter can't believe that Harry is still blaming him for things they did as kids, saying that they all have to deal with heart heartbreak and they don't collapse. But then Harry was never used to not getting what he wanted. MJ tries to stop Peter, but Peter continues, knowing Harry needs to hear this since they can skip all of the self-pity the man has for himself, and he needs to remember that it was him who got Harry to the hospital that night, and it wouldn't be the last time. Harry knows that he's right, knowing the man wants to know where it all went wrong, revealing that night Peter went to call the doctor, the Green Goblin appeared at Harry's window. Harry didn't know at the time since he was unconscious, but Peter did and knew Norman was the Goblin, yet chose not to tell Harry. Peter says that he was just trying to protect his friend, which angers Harry, who slams his fist on the table, saying that Norman Osborn is his father, and he had a right to know about him, and he could have helped his father, but Peter just let him go free. Peter says that he didn't know Norman was still a threat since he had amnesia and didn't remember being the Green Goblin. Harry says that Peter lies since Peter let him go because of the amnesia, but not because he didn't remember he was the Goblin, but because he forgot that Peter was really Spider-Man. Peter refuses to believe that, but Harry says that it's true and he left them all to the whims of his mind, and if he had did the right thing back then, where would Norman have been a few months later instead of Europe and the bridge where he killed Gwen Stacy? Kindred says that Gwen paid the price for Peter's selfishness, and now the family will as well. Norman, now clad in his Green Goblin outfit, infiltrates the crypt as Kindred grabs the family, intending on ending it all, telling Peter that this all runs deeper than some old grudge Peter thinks the villain has. Peter demands to know what it all is then, and whatever he did to wrong Norman, he's sorry, and if the villain turns himself in, they can help him. Kindred becomes enraged, beating Peter down and knocking him out. MJ says that Peter doesn't remember anything he's done to Harry, telling the man not to do this. MJ remembers when Harry as the Goblin took her up to the bridge and how scared she was, but remembers what Harry said about never hurting her and being her friend. She says she believed him then and still does, and Kindred says that he's not doing any of this. Peter is, and it has to end now. MJ tells him to end it then with her instead, saying that she owes a confession to Harry, knowing that she should have been the one to take responsibility. Kindred refused to let her take the blame for Peter's mistakes, but MJ knows that what would get through to Peter better than losing her, and it's simpler and cleaner this way. Before either can do anything, the Green Goblin appears, surprising Kindred, who didn't expect his father to be there. Norman calls the boy a coward, telling him that he was prepared for him the first time he was visited by the boy in Ravencroft. He knows Harry taking the easy way out was what he gets for coddling the boy, throwing his pumpkin bomb at his son, telling him that these people are his to deal with, not his son's. The bomb explodes next to MJ, knocking her out and burying her under rubble as Kindred flies into a rage, saying his father has ruined everything. The two Osborns attack one another as Norman tells Fisk to do it, so the Kingpin activates some type of darkness which engulfs the crypt as Peter finds MJ is still alive in the rubble. She tells Peter that it's all going to be okay and she just needs him to trust her as the darkness consumes them.